Welcome, everybody. I'm Adam Rogers from the Partner Content Marketing team. I'm glad to be joined by David Cameron, who is a product manager for Shopify Plus, and Jesse McGinnis, who is the developer lead for multi-currency. We're excited to give you a glimpse of selling in multiple currencies on Shopify Payments. This is the product feature that will enable merchants to offer local currency right through checkout. Today, David will walk you through the changes of the new multi-currency for Shopify Payments. He will go over what this means for merchant experiences and your Shopify apps. At the end of the webinar, we'll be answering your questions. We've got Jesse McGinnis on hand, as well as David to give you the answers you're looking for. To ask a question, please use the chat box on the right and drop your questions in there. Feel free to do this at any time throughout the webinar. Now I hand this over to David to lead us through selling in multiple currencies on Shopify Payments.
Great, thank you, Adam. Excited to have everybody here join us today as we walk through selling in multiple currencies. I'm David and joined here in the room with Jesse. We're really happy to kind of walk through the changes that we've been working hard on over the last few months and really want to make sure that you have all the information that you need in order to create great merchant experiences with multiple currencies on Shopify Payments. In terms of the agenda for today, I'll go through a bit of an overview for those that aren't familiar with what selling in multiple currencies for Shopify Payments is. I'll walk through the customer experience from storefront all the way through checkout, as well as flip over to the admin experience and how you can enable multi-currency, what are the changes to the admin experience, and what you can actually experience today if you were to go into a development store. We'll walk through the API changes because there's a number of changes. These changes tend to be giving you more information that you can then just be deliberate and explicit about what it is that you're doing. And then we'll walk through how to test this and leave time at the end for any questions and answers that we can go through. So let's begin. So starting off, overview. This is exclusively for Shopify Payments. It is selling in multiple currencies. So what that means is that the buyer, the customer that arrives on the storefront, will have the option to actually complete the entire checkout or buyer experience in another currency. And so up to this point, a customer could only really complete a checkout in the single currency that a store had set up. It is starting with the 9 currencies that are supported by Shopify Payments, and it is located to the Shopify Payments country regions. In terms of timelines, I'll touch on that a little bit right now. So we have released all of our APIs as well as adding it to your development stores a couple of weeks ago. So this is already available. We've got a great migration guide, and hopefully you have everything that you need in order to be successful. After Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we're aiming at about mid-December to start rolling this out to more Shopify Plus merchants. We're starting off to support Shopify Plus merchants, but our intention is to then transition multi-currency to not just Shopify Plus, but all Shopify plans. Now let's go through some of the customer experience. And for this, I'm going to go to our test store here. And what we're seeing here is just the debut theme. And I want to highlight right now, if you actually go to the theme store and download our debut theme, you'll notice that we have already instrumented that with this new currency selector. So on the top right-hand corner of my browser, you're seeing here that I'm currently seeing prices in Canadian dollars. Now, behind the scenes, this store is actually set up as a US dollar store. And so the prices that the merchant actually enters in this case are all US dollar prices. But as a buyer, as a customer here, I'm seeing the prices in Canadian dollars. Now it's selected Canadian dollars because I'm actually located in Canada, and it's looking up my IP address to show me in a currency that's appropriate for my country. With the currency selector, I can switch to other currencies. And in the way that we've implemented that, that's refreshing the page and showing you in Japanese yen. I use that as a really different example from the Canadian dollar one that I just showed you. And again, switching to euros, what you'll notice that every time I transition here, that the prices that are being created are generally friendly in what I would expect if I were a buyer from each one of these countries or familiar with these particular currencies. Nothing really looks odd. And that's really what we've tried to do with this particular release, is make pricing that is built off of that foreign exchange, but is then rounded that is appropriate for that particular currency. Adding that item to cart, you can see again that the prices are flowing through to the cart experience. And then once I go to checkout, this is where the magic happens in terms of multi-currency for Shopify payments, is that I've now actually started a checkout experience in euros. Up to this point, you would be able to start up a checkout in US dollars, but now we're actually beginning that checkout process in euros. So I'll walk through a little bit about what you're seeing here. In the top right-hand corner, that's the same price that we saw for that item on the storefront. And then taxes are being calculated based off the information that is being presented. So in this case, it's doing a calculation of 13% on the $48.95 that you're seeing here. In terms of discount codes, if I apply a 10% off discount code, that is going to take 10% off of what is being displayed here in the checkout experience. So let's do that calculation here. Now, let's say I was going to do a fixed amount discount. In this case, a USD $10 off discount. What you're seeing here is actually the conversion from what $10 USD is to euros. So this is a straight FX conversion. We're not doing any sort of changes to make that a nice looking price. In this particular case, just happened with the rates that it ended up being $9 exactly, but you can imagine that there's going to be some variance here depending on how the rates fluctuate. A note on the rates themselves, I just want to touch on that right now. Rates do not update every minute. Our rates are relatively stable throughout the day. And so we'll have a couple of times throughout the day that these rates will update. So you won't expect that as part of that customer journey, they're going to see a lot of rate changes on a frequent basis. Gift cards will work the same way. If I were to add a multi-currency gift card here, this is just the name I gave to the gift card. You'll see this is a $10 USD gift card, and it's doing the same sort of conversion of saying this is worth $9 euros for this checkout. Let's move on to the next step. I've entered in my shipping information here at the office. And shipping methods are taking the exact same thing. So it's taking your whatever the USD price is. And so if you're an app that provides shipping rates, you will continue to provide shipping rates in the store currency. And what we're going to do is take the rates that you provided us, and we're going to modify that to show what's appropriate for the particular currency checkout here. So if you're a provider that kind of plugs in here, you shouldn't have to do anything different for you to support multi-currency. We do all the work behind the scenes for that. Okay, once we get to the payment step, this is in test mode. So I'm going to enter in some test credentials here. And if I were to then click complete order, this is going to charge my credit card 44.24 euros. And that is regardless of what my credit card is. So if this particular one is likely a USD as the test card, but on the authorization on the credit card, it'll be 44.24. If you're an alternate payment gateway, so the credit card one is being powered by Shopify Payments, but if you were to choose an alternate payment method, in this case, we highlight that US dollar price of this particular checkout. And so we take the 44.24 and we convert that to 50.05 USD. The reason we show it at this stage is we want to make sure that there isn't this big jump between the expectations that we set here of 44.24 euro to when they go to the PayPal screen and they see a different price. So at this point, if they decide that they want to use this particular payment method, we want to give them an indication before they leave the checkout what that price is and the currency that's going to be used for the rest of that transaction. We're going to go through the credit card transaction that's going to happen on Shopify Payments. And then we'll flip over to the admin experience in what the merchant would experience on the other side of this particular order. Another thing to note is that through that entire experience for that particular customer, any emails that were generated by Shopify would also show exactly the same information that they saw in the checkout. And so we've applied those same translations and record keeping to make that experience be very consistent for that customer, all the way from storefront through to checkout, through to all emails that get generated by Shopify. And so I mentioned this is if you have an app or an experience that either plays on that storefront experience, you'll want to make sure that you're showing the correct prices. And then if you are fulfilling kind of that back office or fulfillment side of that particular order, you'll want to continue on showing those currencies and those prices to make sure that the entire buyer journey is a consistent experience. So now we'll go to the merchant experience. First, we're going to start with how did we actually enable multi-currency? In this case, it's in your settings under payment providers, and I have Shopify payments already set up on this particular store. If you go to edit, you will need to complete the actual bank account setup in order to get access. But once you do, and you scroll down, you'll see this new section that gets added called accepted currencies. And in here, you'll see the 9 currencies, the currency that the shop is, as well as 8 additional ones that you can enable. And it's up to you to decide if you want to enable those or don't want to enable those, or pick and choose. And you can turn those off at any point in time in the future as well. So enabling them is as easy as selecting which ones you want, clicking save. And then by default, we're going to automatically have a set of rounding rules that will apply per currency. And the reason we do this is we want to allow merchants to decide, do they want to round up to the nearest dollar? Do they like to have 95 cents in particular countries? Or what's their strategy around currencies for each particular currency? But we have a smart set of defaults that will automatically apply. And just to show you what that looks like today is you'll have a drop down of selections, and I can change certain ones and click save. So if I was just starting out, I went into Shopify payments, I clicked on those. That is technically as far as you'd have to go in order for those prices to start showing up in the storefront. It would leverage the geolocation automatic detection to show the appropriate currency for customers that are visiting that storefront from around the world. Now, many want to then go and add a currency selector and give their customers some choices around currency that might make more sense for their particular use case. Say I'm traveling as an example. And I'll walk through a little bit more on how you can set up your own themes and how you can look at the debut theme a little bit later on. Now let's go to the orders page. So we just completed an order as a customer on the storefront. And you can see here 3 minutes ago, this was me. We've added a new indicator to show that it's a multi-currency order. So in this case, you can see here that this little symbol, and I'm hovering over top of it, where it says this order is in euros. Now on this particular row, we do have a total of what that means in US dollars. And so this particular screen is all about kind of average order value and understanding what does this mean for you as a merchant. When you click on the details of that particular order, the default is in the currency of the buyer. And so you'll see here exactly what I just saw as I went through that checkout experience. But let's say I don't really understand euros or I don't understand Japanese yen, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You can switch to seeing the entire order in your own shop currency. So you can kind of see it was 55.20, et cetera, all the way through. And it's as easy as toggling back and forth. In this particular store, we have it set up as authorization and manual capture. So I just want to show you what it looks like to manually capture this particular payment. Now, because this transaction was authorized in euros, I then need to capture the payment in euros. Even though I'm a US dollar shop, I can't capture more than I've authorized on that particular credit card in euros. And so in this case, this particular dialog is all about euros. And when that goes through, there are some things here on the timeline that I just want to highlight. So you can see here from a capture perspective, that transaction is happening on Shopify payments and 44.24 euros. And then when I go to my payout information, we also break that down into all the different pieces that make into it. So we have the 44.24 euros, a conversion fee or a conversion rate that we're using to get to that Shopify payout currency that you have, the Shopify payments fee, the currency conversion fee, and the total that I'd expect to see on my payout. When I go through that capture, if you are an application that does either do a refund or a capture transaction, it's important that you start being explicit about the currency that you're using with those transactions. And so when you encounter your first multi-currency order, and I'll go through this again a little bit more when we go through the APIs, but I think it's important to highlight it here that we don't want to make any assumptions around what your intent was around the amount that you pass in for capturing or refund. And so it's safe to start adding currency to every single refund and capture transaction that you have today. And what that'll mean is that at the first time you interact with the multi-currency order, it'll work. If you're missing that currency field in those API calls and you're interacting with a multi-currency order, that is a breaking change and we will fail that request with an error. Another page that we've modified within the admin experience is about understanding how an individual product will change its price to each one of those currencies in the storefront. So in this particular case, we are looking at the same sort of shirt that we just purchased on the storefront. And I can scroll down here to see all of the currencies that I've enabled, as well as the price and the compare at price that would show if I were to go to the storefront and toggle between those. And so this will give you a nice, easy way to see, does this naturally make sense for you in terms of that automatic pricing? These are also the same prices that you would get if you're using the product API or the product variants API. And so this will just show you kind of how the result of all of our rate conversions and rounding rules will provide these particular prices. All right, let's move into the API changes. Before we begin, the big theme here with our API changes is that we really have two currencies that are now at play for every order, as well as we also have a number of different currencies that now are at play with products and product variant APIs. The one that's being displayed to the customer. And so we think about an order, the customer's currency and all the prices and values that are associated with that customer experiences is what we're calling the presentment currency. It was presented to them through that entire experience. Now, the shop currency is a currency that all of you would have been using up to this point. It's the currency of the merchants, what they set their pricing at. It's where they get their reports. It's really their entire business is around this particular currency. And so depending on what your application or what your integration does, you'll want to make a deliberate choice between which currency is the most appropriate for your particular interaction. And so if you start off with a storefront experience, you're more likely going to want the presentment currency that is currently being displayed. If you're completing some reporting type activities, or you don't really have any place that you're showing a price to a buyer, you can continue to use shop currency. And so by default, if you're consuming some of these webhook APIs, the field that you've continued to query will most often be that shop currency. So starting from the themes, so the storefront experience, we have introduced a few new liquid drops. This will give you access to find out what the currency is of the cart, as well as all of the enabled currencies for the shop. So you'll be able to list through those, and we actually do that with our debut theme. So I'd encourage everybody here to really install that and play around with the code. I'll point you to the files that are important there. We also have a currency form. Now, this currency form is the way that you can update the currency that the customer is currently seeing. So you can post to this, and it'll change that currency. There's also a new JavaScript object, which is shopify.currency.active, which will give you the current 3-letter ISO code for the currency. And let's say you have an integration where you want it to always default or override that geolocation. You can create links with this URL parameter of currency. And what that will do is it'll prefer whatever it is that you're passing in there over top of any of our geolocation. And so if you're creating an advertisement that was in Canadian dollars to a Canadian market, you can then say, when they click on this link, they'll get a Canadian experience regardless of where they are. So diving in a little bit closer to the debut theme, if you go and view the code, what we did was in our header.liquid, you can see here at the top where we has if the shop.enabled currency size is greater than 1. Basically, if there's more than one currency that's enabled on this particular store, then we're going to show that currency selector. So if you're building themes, you can kind of take a similar strategy where you build these currency selectors in and only expose those when the particular merchant has multiple currencies enabled. And then you can do other things for every currency that's in those enabled currencies and really build whatever currency selector experience you want. Now, in terms of how we are doing the submission of that currency form, we're doing it on any on-change events. We're just doing a JavaScript. When you select something from the drop-down list, we're going to then submit that form to the currency form. And that's how we're actually making that all work on the debut theme. So there's a pretty comprehensive migration guide that I would encourage everybody that's here joining us today spends a bit of time looking through and playing around with. We continue to evolve this page as we do get feedback from partners around different areas that might need a little bit more explanation or attention in terms of just the API responses. In terms of this, it details out what the difference is between shop currency, presentment currency, as well as whether or not your app is affected by multi-currency. Now, the biggest thing is if you're ever displaying a price in either a pre or a post purchase experience, then you'll likely be affected and you'll want to use that presentment currency or that presentment price. And there's a number of our API resources, product, the checkout, the order, refund transactions, customer, and shop that are all changed as part of the multi-currency. And these are all live. Some of them do require either an upgrade to your Shopify app or Shopify API gem if you're using those. In other cases, there are some that require, a header to be included to get additional requests. And so part of, if you are using the API gems, those will automatically happen. But if you aren't and you're querying some of these APIs directly, you'll need to pass in this particular request header to get the different presentment prices for products. In terms of the response here, because this is giving you all the prices for all the different products, it is an array of all those different prices in US dollars, euros, and all the different currencies that are currently enabled on that storefront. If you are using GraphQL, again, those have been updated and we have examples here to show you exactly how to get all of this information. From a checkout resource, again, we've added some additional fields here around currency and presentment currency just so that you totally understand what's happening in each one of these particular API calls. In terms of the order resource, what we've done is taken essentially a lot of the fields that already existed and we've added this set to them. So subtotal price becomes subtotal price set. And within that set is both the shop and the presentment currency values. And we have added a new field called presentment currency so that you can query that to see exactly what the currency was that was displayed to the customer through that particular order. Here's just a brief overview of what you'll see when you look through the migration guide. Same thing with line items and carrying all the way through. So refund, as I mentioned when I was going through the merchant experience, this is where we've introduced that currency option here. So you'll want to make sure to pay close attention if you are using the refund API, and the same thing with the transactions APIs. If you are requesting information about a refund, That follows that same sort of behavior as an order, where we now have subtotal set, which will provide you with both that shop money and the presentment money. And so if you're pulling this in for record keeping or what have you, you'll be able to choose specifically which information is most appropriate for your particular use case. Now, the customer resource, we have added more of a helper field within that customer. And so this currency will display the currency code for the last order that this customer placed. So if you're trying to, say, do an email marketing campaign and you want to show them prices for products that are best sellers in your catalog, you can then use this customer property to make sure that you're sending them appropriate priced products. From a shop resource perspective, this is an API that you can query to see which ones are currently enabled, the enabled presentment currencies on this particular shop. Now, if you're someone that is pulling in kind of a local copy of our product catalog for a merchant and storing that, you'll want to understand how you can update your prices and kind of keep them in sync with the experiences that are happening on the storefront. And I'd highly recommend, and our recommended approach is to pull through our product APIs and our product variant APIs rather than trying to reverse engineer a rate and rounding rule. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure that as we iterate on the complexity of our rounding rules and future changes within multi-currency for Shopify payments, we don't break the integrations that you've made. And so your safest bet today is to integrate with the prices that are generated through the product and product variant APIs. Now, the question then becomes, well, how often and how do I know when I need to be able to update those prices? And so that will happen when a rate changes, as an example. It doesn't guarantee that a price is changed. And the reason for that is that we take the rate and conversion fee and do a rounding rule. And when that rounding rule affords us some stability to that price. And so unless there's a huge shift in the FX rate, or you've just bumped up to the next tier of a rounding, say to the next dollar increment, many times these particular currency rate changes won't actually result in a product price. The way that you'll be able to tell if a rate change has happened is by querying the currencies.json API, and you can see the timestamp for when those rates are updated. These do not update every minute. They update periodically throughout the day. So it's just and you can query one particular shop. You don't have to query all shops to get this. This will be a platform-wide update, but this is the recommended way to get those particular initiating moments. And we're checking every 15 minutes. Now, obviously that's subject to change, but we recommend that you don't try to call us more than every 15 minutes because you're just going to get the same response. And then for testing the multi-currency feature, I have some screenshots that walk through this as well, but there's more information here in terms of how you can test that if you forget that as well. All right, webhooks. We talked about the APIs. Webhooks have gone through a very similar treatment where we've added total discount sets, total price sets, etc. And so the idea being here, if you are currently, say, showing prices to buyers, it should be a fairly easy migration for you to just pull the appropriate value out of the set that you want to use. And so encourage that everybody migrates to using these sets in either the webhooks or in the APIs, just to be very explicit about which money value is the money value that's most appropriate for your application. Or if it makes sense, pull both. Right. And this really gives you this opportunity to have that same sort of representation of what we have on our back end, to have those same representations in your particular app and app experiences. So for development stores, if you are a partner, you do have access to development stores. And if you're not a partner, this is a great opportunity to sign up as a partner to get access to development stores and play around with the multi-currency features with Shopify payments. So from my partner dashboard, I can go to development stores and create that development store. And once I've done that, logging into that store, I can go to the settings page, payment providers, and add a provider here. Adding Shopify payments. And then once you've done that, you're going to need to complete the account setup. Once you've completed that account setup, you can click on edit and you'll get that list. And this is sort of that default experience here where you let that list of the currencies that you can then enable. Now, there are some limitations to the way that it's currently set up. You obviously need to be able to enable Shopify payments. You need to be able to add a bank account, and recognize that that's adding some barrier to partners and theme developers in order to get access to test out this feature in their development stores. That's an area that we're working on, trying to find a solution to help those that aren't in the Shopify payments country to get access. In the meantime, all of our APIs do provide the structure of the response necessary for you to be able to integrate and actually query the right APIs. It's just unfortunate you won't be able to test to see the variation between those shop values and the presentment values at this time. And if you're a partner that's working with Shopify Plus, there are some additional changes that have happened there or opportunities. And so I just want to highlight those at this point. If you're creating flows for partners or for merchants, or are interested in creating tutorials around this, we have added the presentment currency code as well to that order. And so it does have access to that. And you can use that in any of your automations that you're creating for merchants. Then on Shopify Scripts, we've added in Shopify Scripts 2 additional things. One is the presentment currency that is on the cart object, and a money derived from presentment. And so for those that aren't familiar with what Shopify Scripts is a feature specifically for Shopify Plus merchants that allows them to write some Ruby code to change either the way that the cart gets discounted in the checkout, or the shipping rates in how they're ordered and displayed, as well as the payment options. And so we have 3 types of scripts: line item scripts, shipping scripts, and payment scripts. Now, with this and multi-currency, you can do things like creating a specific discount for a currency. And so in the example on the left-hand side here, what we're doing is we're checking to see if the card is in Canadian dollars. And then if it is, and let's say it matches a particular discount code for Canadian dollars, we can kind of override that particular experience and provide a very specific $5 off Canadian dollar amount. And so this will give you some ability to leverage different currency experiences within Shopify Scripts. So let's say you wanted to hide payment options or change shipping options. You can do so by leveraging the cart presentment currency value. So release timelines, we talked about this at the beginning, but I want to make sure that we talk about it again, is we're looking to roll this out mid-December after Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We recognize that everybody is probably working really, really hard to get everything ready for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. All of these APIs are available to you today, so you should be able to access and make that migration. And we're looking to roll this out to more Plus merchants mid-December. Great, and we'll pass it back to Adam here. If there are any questions that have come up through the course of the webinar, and I'm also joined here with Jesse, so either one of us will jump in with some of those answers.
Great, thank you, David. That was very insightful and a great look into selling in multiple currencies. So we have a few questions, and we'll slowly work our way through them. So the first one was, does the merchant need to update prices in different currencies, or does the currency conversion happen automatically?
Yeah, great question. So right now in this particular release, all prices are generated automatically. And so we take the prices that a merchant puts in. So if you're interacting with the products API and say setting prices, you will continue to set prices in whatever that shop currency is. And then what is going to happen is we are going to apply the FX rates and the rounding rules to generate a price for every other currency. And so if their interaction is from a creation of prices or update of prices, you will continue to do the same thing that you do today.
Okay, and this next one is on a similar topic. What if the merchant needs to offer a different price for a specific currency instead of automatic conversion? Is this possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. That isn't possible in this particular release. as you can imagine, we're definitely hearing lots of requests for that, and that's something that we're working towards enabling in sort of the future. But as of this moment, in this particular release, the prices can only be set in the shop currency and then the automatic pricing. And so if that's the use case for that particular merchant, right now, the best way to do that is through multiple stores if they're a Plus merchant, and you can use that.
Great. So the next one is on rounding rules. So you mentioned that there was some rounding between currency conversions. What are the rounding rules, if any, on the customer side? Does it only apply to the subtotal, or does it apply to discounts as well?
Great question, Jesse here. So rounding rules apply to the specific line items. There's a few options that change per currency. Feel free to play around in the admin to see all of your options. As of today, they only round up as to minimize risk to the merchant and in terms of cost. That may change in the future as we learn more about what types of strategies merchants are interested in using in building their prices. There's no rounding applied to totals. It's only at the line item level. It also doesn't apply to shipping, discounts, or taxes.
So the next question is on the theme. So this partner has just taken a look at the install of the debut theme, and they're not seeing the currencies coming up. Will that only come up if Shopify Payments is activated?
Yeah, so you'll notice that in the first part of that code that I showed, we're checking to see if you've got more than one enabled currency before we show the currency selector. So if you're using the development store, have Shopify Payments, and then have gone through the step of enabling other accepted currencies, then you should see that currency selector show up. If you want to, from a testing perspective, you could just get rid of that first line or comment that first line out of that if statement, and you should then see the currency selector, although in this case, it'll just be the one currency that'll show up for the store. But it's one way if you haven't had the ability to play around with Shopify Payments yet, to see what that currency selector looks like.
And a further question on this topic, are all of the current templates compatible with multi-currency? As in, do they have the code installed already?
Yeah, so the themes themselves, we've only updated our debut theme today. We are working with theme partners, and hopefully there's some theme partners on the call as well that will take inspiration from our theme code and update theirs. For right now, in terms of the ones that are Shopify supported, the debut theme is the only one that has been updated so far with the multi-currency selector.
This one's on the timeline rollout. Someone has asked, when do you hope this will roll out to all Shopify plans and not just Plus?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously, we're all excited about multi-currency, and we really want to get it to everyone. There are some things that we want to change with that experience to make that rollout possible. I don't have a specific release timeline at this point I can share, but know that this is definitely a plan for us to continue to roll this out to more plans.
This one's from Jerry. So he's asked, will the order retain the currency rate? He says, if I look at the order placed in euros a month later, then press the USD store currency button, will it show current exchange rate or the rate the day the order was placed?
The values will be fixed based on the time that the order was created. We do not expose the exchange rate that was used on that particular order, though. But you can always see the stable prices that appeared at that time. So if an order goes through for 100 USD, which got rounded to 125 CAD, and then you look at it a month later, it'll still be the same values.
Padma asks, if I wanted to send a refund request through the API, which currency values should I be sending?
So for all refund requests, you should always use the presentment currency used for that particular order. You can find that value through a lot of other API calls. The migration guide goes into great detail around this.
Do you have a currency for Mexico? If not, when will this be available?
Yeah, right now with Shopify payments, we have 9 currencies. Mexico is not one of the currently supported Shopify payments currencies. I don't have any specific whether or not that is the next country or one of the next countries. We're constantly enabling Shopify payments in more countries. And so it's quite possible that that would be a country that is enabled. This will work when it's enabled in more countries. However, it isn't yet supported as a Shopify payments country.
How does it work with things added to the cart and visited later? Is there a notification to the customer of currency affecting the prices?
So there's no notification to the customer. The intent with this feature is to create a seamless experience for the buyer. Prices don't generally fluctuate. That said, if a customer adds an item to a cart, comes back 2 days later, somehow their cart is still active, the price may have changed. It's generally not likely, again, as we said earlier, that the price will shift, but it's always a possibility.
So this partner has asked, if I use Shopify IX API and I call products product-handle.js, is it automatically a return to me the product price in current selected currency?
So just off the top of my head, I'm not sure I know exactly which API that you're referring to. What I would encourage you is to play around with that and see if that does return the presentment currency or the shop currency. And if it doesn't, I would encourage you to send us an email and let us know, or on the forums and reach out to us so that we can make sure that we have the right answer for you. And it's possible that we'll just need to follow up on that particular question.
So this one's on the theme you were demonstrating in the merchant experience. So how can you create the currency drop-down menu?
So creating the currency drop-down menu is using those new liquid variables that we outlined. Using shop.enabled presentment currencies gives you the list of currency choices. Putting that within the currency drop form would allow you to submit which currency you want to make active, whether you use a select radio button or something more creative, whatever suits your theme. Using those 2 pieces of information plus the third one that tells you the active currency, you should be able to build any drop-down that suits your approach.
Are there any changes that are going to require a change for stores that don't want to use multi-currency yet?
If they're not using multi-currency, then they won't generate multi-currency orders. And so they won't need to change anything from a theme perspective, obviously, because they won't have any other currencies to show. And then from a refund or transaction perspective, if they've never encountered a multi-currency order, that right now will not cause any sort of breaking change. So if you have a store that isn't planning on working with multi-currency, or in the near term, there won't be any changes that are necessary as part of this. They will all be available, so you can do that migration to just be more explicit as a kind of a maintenance task, but nothing should change really in that experience.
Yeah. I would encourage you to update to use the new API. It's a lot more explicit, and it does protect you for the future changes that may come down the line.
Do you have a couple of Plus stores that currently use this feature so we can see the experience?
Great question. We are working with a couple of Plus stores to get this rolled out for them. As you can imagine, the impacts here do have, depending on how an application fits into that experience, there are a few apps that we do need to work on getting those updated so that it makes sure that that buyer has that really great experience. We're working with a few Plus merchants today, none that I can share with you on the call today or the webinar today that you can go play around with. The best way is obviously to go play around with your own development store and enable it. That's really sort of the best way today.
This question is from Galen. He's asked, is it possible to have different bank accounts for each currency?
Hey, Galen, great question. At this time, that's not an option. This feature is really meant to be a single currency bank account and making it simple to sell in other currencies and empowering your buyers. If you're looking to have multiple currencies in your bank, really the best choice is to set up multiple stores, each attached to its appropriate bank account.
And will you roll this out to support other payment providers such as PayPal?
Right now, we're starting off with Shopify Payments. Part of that reason for that is, as we mentioned, in terms of our rates and how they are stable throughout the day. Obviously, rolling it out with other payment providers that don't have that same sort of stability would pose some additional challenges. So our focus right now has just been on the Shopify Payments and Shopify Payments launch. So no specific details on rollouts to other payment gateways with multi-currency.
In the future, will it be possible to set specific prices in different currencies?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously no guarantees around kind of future roadmap, but that's definitely something that we keep hearing in a lot of the conversations. And so that's an area that we are definitely exploring around what that would look like. And part of the reason why we encourage you to use our product and product variance API is that, if we add that in the future, then it's very natural for you to not have to update your applications if you're in a read-only state. To make your integrations work. Obviously, if we were to introduce this and you write product pricing, then we would have to change the API to support you on that. Again, no timelines, but that's something that we hear time and time again when we talk to Plus merchants and other merchants as well as partners. So know that it's something that we are listening to.
So Robert has asked about rollout, and he's curious to know if it will roll out across all countries in mid-December.
Yeah, good question. I mean, the rollout is really just for Plus merchants, and so there aren't any geographical restrictions other than the ones that are with Shopify Payments. So it's not like we are going to necessarily roll this out to US only or Australia only or anything like that. It will partially depend on obviously the partner experiences and making sure that what we're delivering to the market is creating that great customer experience. And so my big ask for anybody that's on the call today, if you do have an application or a theme that is being used by a Plus merchant, or you're building a private application for a Plus merchant, making sure that you're putting in that effort today to do those migrations and just be a bit more explicit will give us that ability to roll this out more broadly to Plus merchants. The biggest barrier really in kind of doing that will be kind of setting our merchants up that their end customers have a poor experience. And when I say poor experience, it isn't to say that they aren't going to get the right product. It just means that they might get some odd behavior on the storefront if, say, they see some prices in Canadian dollars and other prices in euros, or maybe on a fulfillment side of things, they're getting notification that instead of my euro dollar product, it's showing me US dollar prices. And so those are the types of oddities with those experiences that we'd really like to avoid, and making sure that it's a great experience for everybody involved. But in terms of geographical restriction, no, there aren't geographical restrictions in terms of how that'll roll out, other than the Shopify Payments being a requirement. And then ideally, it'll be based off of the apps that have updated and migrated to working with multi-currency, such that more Plus merchants are able to take advantage of the feature.
For theme designers, will updating themes just be getting the latest theme and doing a iteration on that, or could theme developers start by getting something like a Git patch for these big changes?
If you're for JVU specifically, the easiest would be to download the new change. But really what was outlined in the presentation is the extent of the changes for introducing a currency dropdown. We don't have a Git patch currently planned, but you can kind of visually see the about 20 lines involved.
Yeah, you should be able to just simply kind of go into those and copy and paste those, and then use as a starting point for any of the CSS tweaks that you want to make specifically for your theme. And I mean, mainly the biggest reason there is you want to make sure that that currency selector is appropriate for your particular theme. And if you're building a multi-currency selector as an app, as an example, integrating with our enabled presentment currencies, I think is a really great smart step in terms of that integration.
So this next question is from one of our app development partners. So first, they wanted to let you know, great job. And second of all, they were curious, how should apps convert to the selected currency on the client side via JavaScript?
So from JavaScript, there was that one new field introduced, shopify.currency.active. That's kind of your key to know what the presented currency on Storefront is. Depending on what you're doing with your integration, you might need to do some API calls as well, depending on what you're trying to display. We're also watching the forums to see what other tooling would help you build your apps in a great way to work with multi-currency. So if there's things that are missing that would really help you out, please reach out to us and let us know.
So we've got time for a couple more questions. For everyone else, we'll try and get back to you over email as soon as possible. This question is around taxes. So they've asked, how does the displayed pricing work with different countries with regards to tax? For example, I display prices without tax for my US shops, but for my EU shop, I show prices inclusive of tax.
Yeah, it's a great question. So in this particular case, it's going to choose whatever your shop. So those settings today are a shop-based setting. And so whatever it is that you have set up on the shop will apply to all currencies that are being displayed. So it's really more of that providing customers with different options for checking out at that set price. It's not currently taking into consideration that in Europe, the way that I display that is inclusive, and the way that I display that in the US would be exclusive of tax. So the best way to kind of work with this is probably to have more region-based stores today for that particular scenario, where you have your tax inclusive pricing to be in a particular region. And then for North America, as an example, where we have exclusive, you could set up a shop that's Canadian and US. I think that answers the question.
Okay, and this will be our final question. So what does reporting look like? Are back-end metrics able to display sales in multiple currencies, or only the single currency that exchange rates are based on?
Yeah, so reporting is still predominantly in that shop currency, with the goal of giving the merchant a full picture of their business and how it's performing. That said, we're looking to add a few new reports in that allow you to get a view of your business based on a currency perspective, right? So understanding, do you have N orders coming through in CAD, USD, JPY, or understanding the impact of multi-currency on your business. But the most reporting remains in shop currency, so you can have that unified view into how your business is doing.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thanks to David and Jesse for David's presentation and Jesse being on hand to help with the answers to these questions. For everyone else, we will send out the recording as soon as it's ready. So check your email in a couple of days or early next week, and you'll be able to rewatch this recording.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.